How's it going, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts Dylan and Davin. And today we're going to discuss probably the guy that was talked about the most from the season opener on Tuesday. That is Mikal Bridges. He was also talked about a lot during the preseason as well for a myriad of different reasons, more specifically the jump shot. I think a lot of us now know the whole story surrounding the jump shot changes or, the weird hitch in his shot or just his struggles, period. So we're just going to discuss him because I think, leading into this next game against Indiana and moving forward, he's going to have to step up. He's going to have to play at the level that he at least was in Phoenix. Obviously we want him to play like how he was with Brooklyn, but we're not expecting him to be a number one option. We just need him to be a serviceable second or third option, and that's what we really need him from going forward. It was a very up and down game from Bridges on opening night. He had an improved second half, but a dreadful first half that was, carried over from the preseason struggles. So we're just going to dive into what he really needs to improve on moving forward. So, Davin, tell me how you're doing first off, and what are some things you really want to see Mikal Bridges improve on, not just in Friday's game against Indiana, but moving forward?
Doing great, man. Thank you for asking. There was, talks of how criticized he was opening night. 7 for 13 from the field. Moving forward, he finished with 16 points. I believe this was a highly criticized game because of things like the tremendous lead the Celtics had, along with him looking like Michael Kidd Gilchrist out there with the jump shot. It was like little things like that. Mikal Bridges was definitely shocking the world in real time. As everyone's tuning into this one game and they're like, wow, this is not what we anticipated from Mikal Bridges. But that's what we expect, really. 35 minutes, 16 to 18 point range is fine for me. He looked way better in the second half. You couldn't imagine a guy changing his jump shot in the half like Mikal Bridges did. We actually saw that happen in real time. Never do that again, by the way. I hope he doesn't ever ever try to attempt that again. But it's the shooting woes are just what took over all the narratives going on because he finished pretty prolific. I think really to make himself being better going forward, he has to do better well meshing with Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges were former first options just last season. And adjusting to a role where you're not the first option anymore, that's really where I believe Mikal Bridges is going to maximize himself. Just kind of fitting right beside Brunson well. Carl Anthony Towns had 2 assists to Bridges in the second half. Campaign 2 assists to Bridges in the second half. Chemistry with Brunson, though, there were not any assist exchange between those two. It's like the guys got to understand how to mesh with each other on the floor as well as without each other on the floor. Mikal Bridges will be playing bench minutes at times and such. So it's like that's kind of what I see going forward. Getting great chemistry with Brunson so you don't look lost like you did in the first half. And then we have a situation where when you get those open shots, you get those better opportunities, it won't be so much highly criticized about that jump shot. That's how I see it.
Right, and before I get into the offensive stuff, I want to talk about his defense because I think that was another point of emphasis from opening night. Now, I know he was guarding Jason Tatum, and Jason Tatum is one of the more prolific shot-creating forwards in the NBA, so I understand that it's a tough matchup. But man, that was rough out there. I'm sorry, but that was rough watching Bridges try to guard him. Like, we briefly discussed this in our previous video recapping the Celtics game, where I said that OG Anunoby should have been guarding Jason Tatum, and I think the common consensus amongst the Knicks fans and everybody else would agree with that OG should have been guarding Jason Tatum because OG is your best defender. Yes, Mikal Bridges, on paper, of course, or by history, is supposed to be an elite defender. So I understand why, you kind of have flexibility and you're able to kind of just be like, okay, well, we might as well see what Bridges can hold him, hold down the fort, and OG can kind of lock down the inside. Well, that did not work at all. It did not. Jason Tatum was giving Mikal Bridges buckets. I think Tatum missed only 4 shots all game, and I think 2 of those came when OG was guarding him, by the way. So, I personally, I really just want to see better defensive effort from Bridges. Like, obviously I'll get into the offense and the jump shot and all that stuff, but defensively I was a little let down by it. I was expecting a lot more on that side of the floor from Bridges on opening night, and that's defense is one thing that's like you don't need to have as much chemistry on that end as you do offensively. Like, yeah, you got to have defensive chemistry. You got to be able to know where to be, like if you run a zone and all that stuff. But when you're guarding man's one-on-one, that's on you as a defender alone, individually. That's not a team-centric effort. So the way he was, struggling to contain Jason Tatum on opening night, I just need better effort. I just need to see better. I could not, really believe what I was seeing, honestly. Jason Tatum was getting whatever he wanted whenever Bridges was on him, which was for the majority of the game. I mean, Tatum scored 37 points on, 14 of 18 shooting and hit 8 three-pointers. You can't allow a guy to hit 8 three-pointers. I'm sorry, you can't. When you The Knicks traded, I think, 6 first-round picks for this guy, which is a lot. And I'm not over here saying, of course, that it was a bad idea because it's one game. I know a lot of people were ragging on Bridges for a myriad of things, and people were saying that the Knicks traded all these picks for Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and all this stuff. I understand that we're having the game one overreactions already, and I know I sound like I'm overreacting in a way, but I think ultimately I'm expecting better defensive effort from Bridges. He's a hard worker. I am not exactly concerned whatsoever. Yeah, it was alarming seeing what happened on opening night, but I think it's something that will work itself out. Bridges is he's been known to be a great defender for most of his career. Obviously, kind of took a step back a little bit in Brooklyn, but that was because he had such an offensive responsibility to take on, and that's why he took a step back defensively. So I do think he will kind of return to that first team all defense form this season. It's going to take time, but I think he will return to that form. But I was just let down by how he guarded Tatum. I was let down, and I think against Indiana, another team that really excels from the three-point shooting, he's going to have to step up on that end of the floor and really lock it down. If the Knicks can contain the Pacers from shooting the lights out, then they're in a good spot to win the game. It's that simple. I mean, you could argue the same thing would have happened in Boston if they held Boston to even just half of those threes that they made. The Knicks could win that game because the Knicks shot the ball very well. They played really good offense. Boston just had a historic shooting night, and the Knicks couldn't keep up with it. It happens. I mean, if you're credit to the Boston Celtics, because if you're going to shoot like that every single night, you're not going to lose a single game all year. So, if that's how it's going to be, then that's how it's going to be. But I'm hoping we get better effort from Bridges down the road, and I'm not going to look too deeply into one game, but it was disappointing. Now, offensively, of course, I agree with what you said. 16, 17, 18 points. That's fine. I can totally live with that on a nightly basis from Bridges. But that first half was just so alarming because, he struggled so bad in the preseason. He went 2 of 19 from 3 in the preseason and had that one game against Washington where he was 0 of 10 from 3, which was just like, okay, maybe it's just preseason rust. I'm not going to look into it too deeply. But then first half of game 1 against Boston, it was more of the same struggles. And I was like, what is going on? Why is he missing all these shots? And it's not like he was getting bad looks. He was getting very good looks, clean looks. They just weren't falling. And I understand, even the best of shooters endure really bad shooting slumps. It happens. And I'd rather it happen now in the beginning of the season than later on in the season or in the playoffs especially. But still, I was just like, what is going on? Why, especially with the jump shot changes as well, because his jumper obviously had that weird hitch to it, and then I guess he changed it mid-game. I've been seeing, obviously I watched the game, so I noticed the difference in it in real time, but, even looking at the film and stuff like that, he looked a lot smoother in the second half, and it looked a lot more like the Mikal Bridges that we traded for, but I just want to see more consistency on that end of the floor. I don't want to have these games where we're having really bad first halves and great second halves, or vice versa, really good first halves and quiet second halves. I just want consistency. Because I'm not expecting Mikal Bridges to drop 30 points a night. That's what we have Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns out there for. But Bridges has to be that reliable third option that can also put up a good 15 to 20 points a night. He has to. Because with the way that the Knicks rotation is right now and how thin we are, especially in the bench, we're going to need a lot of production out of Bridges. We're really going to need a lot out of him. We're asking for a lot out of him already. We're essentially asking him to run the second unit. So they're asking a lot out of him already, of course, and I know that can be a lot on a player to take on, especially when you just got traded to a new team. But we know that Bridges has been around for a while. He's a veteran. He's a guy who's used to having to take on a bigger role. He was asked to do quite a lot with the Brooklyn Nets, so this really shouldn't be that much of a difference for him, really, or if anything, it should be a lighter workload. So I'm hoping that, down the road it improves both offensively and defensively. I'm not too worried about Bridges right now. I know a lot of Knicks fans were, very overreactive a little bit about it and saying that we wasted all these draft picks or that we should have kept Dante and all this stuff. Bridges is a great player, okay? He's a fantastic two-way player. I saw Knicks Muse on Twitter tweet this, and I agree with him. He said, you don't just go from an elite two-way player to a bum in one offseason. You don't. It doesn't happen that way. So I'm not worried about him. I just want to see better from him on both sides. What do you think about all that, though? Because I know I said a lot, so I know you're going to have a lot to say about that in response.
No, man, you really covered all the bases for it. Like I said, he's a hard worker. Mikal Bridges is a hard worker. I'm not really worried about too much. I think the overreaction is definitely coming from the blowout win that we saw for the Celtics, as well as the Knicks just not living up to the hype. That's really what it all is, man. It all boils down to that. People frustration with that. We anticipate Knicks fans to have seen it all over the last decade and a half, so they know where the ebbs and flows come from. And to see your first game go out like that, and Mikal Bridges put on that performance, man, you have to know what's going to happen on social media. You have to know the outrage is going to be there. But yeah, 29% from three. That's really what the only problem is coming out of that game. Consistency, getting cohesion with your teammates. Like you said, Mikal Bridges is now former first option, now a third option. That takes some time. That takes some time to get used to. That takes some time to not having the ball in your hands, having the right usage, getting the right flow, things of that nature. So Mikal Bridges really just finding himself in his own groove and everything. That takes a little time, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. No one expected it to go out the way it did, as bad as it was. Like I said, taking the loss. I said last episode, taking the loss, not a big deal, not a big deal. But taking the loss to that magnitude and then performing the way you did in that first half, diabolical performance from the New York Knicks. I really hope that they have their heads on straight against the Indiana Pacers on Friday. I anticipate them to. It's a home opener. That will be great. Chance for these guys to bounce back and really show the league what they have in store. Like I said as well yesterday, though, we have another 50 games until we meet the Boston Celtics again. So Mikal Bridges has plenty of time to get, iron sharpening iron amongst the rotation and go ahead and get where he has to be and be on the right level he needs to be when it comes to facing Jason Tatum again. Because a Jason Tatum matchup, Anunoby, that's more what he needs there. That's more Anunoby's strength guarding Jason Tatum. But at the same time, Mikal Bridges, this is first team all defense. This guy's not a weakling out there. He's not. I'm not going to say that you can't hold your head up against Jason Tatum just because you had a bad game. I mean, of course, we won't want to see that again. But I believe he's a hard worker. Josh Hart already said that. He vouched for him really well. You're going to be back when he sees him again. It's going to be a much more competitive matchup. But it's all about now we have this whole entire road till we get there again against the Celtics. So really have to harden in and lock in and get this chemistry going for the New York Knicks.
Right, and the chemistry is a big thing, and I know I said that on the defensive side you don't need it's not as much of a chemistry thing as it is on offense, but at the same time you still need to be able to know where your guys are defensively. You got to be able to communicate, you got to be able to do all these different types of things to be able to, be an effective defender. It's not just simply, oh, be big and be tall and have long arms. No, you got to be able to, know where to be on the court. You got to know your positioning and stuff. It takes a lot. So I understand it, and that's really the big thing for me, because I'm not worried about the offense in general, and I'm not worried about the team's offense. Like Mikal Bridges' offense, of course, like we witnessed it go up and down on opening night, right? But the team's offense as a whole, I'm not worried about it, because I know Jalen Brunson's going to get his buckets. I know Karl Anthony Towns is going to get going. Those two guys are going to lead the offensive charge. That's really what I know as far as I know with this offense. The defense is the big thing. I mean, you allowed 132 points on opening night. You allowed 43 points in the first quarter. Those are the things that stood out to me the most, is the defense. And when you have Bridges and Anunoby out there, you're supposed to be a lockdown defensive group, right? Well, they weren't on opening night. And in fact, they were one of the worst defensive performances in the Tom Thibodeau era. Because I think that's actually the most first quarter points they had allowed in years. And allowing 29 threes too, tying an NBA record, that's also up there too. It's like just an awful defensive performance, and it starts with Bridges in that regard. It does. Like you can't expect Jalen Brunson to lock down Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. You can't expect that. You can barely even expect that from Josh Hart. But you're expecting Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby to shut down a team's two best players. You are expecting that on a nightly basis, and that is not what happened on opening night. It's not. Bridges did not shut down Jason Tatum whatsoever. If anything, Tatum saw Bridges in front of him and said, baby food. That's food.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, I just want a better defensive performance. That's all I'm asking for on Friday against Indiana. Indiana's not the best defensive team, as we know. The Knicks can light those guys up, with anybody. So I'm not worried about the offense. I feel like because of that, Bridges will have an improved offensive performance. I'm hoping he can build off that improved second half he had against Boston and carry that over into the next game against Indiana, but also the games moving forward, because they have games against Cleveland and then Miami right after that. So it doesn't get easier to start the year. They're put up to the test right away. But you know what, though? If we're as good as we say we are, we should be able to beat these guys, right? So I just want to see better performances on that side, on the defensive side especially. The offense will come around. I'm not worried about it. I think at some point Bridges will kind of figure out his role offensively and kind of get into a groove. He's been too consistent of a player for most of his career to just take a complete drastic downfall. So I'm not worried about that. It's just the defense. Just play better defense, and that's really all I can ask for.
Yeah.
I don't have much else to say about it, though. I want to get your final thoughts on Bridges, though, and what we really need to see from him moving forward before we wrap this up.
Now, we covered all the points very, very well. going forward, defense is the masterclass we're going to be needing from OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. And what makes it even crazier is the fact that if you're going to be the one locking down the team's other two perimeter guys or other two top cornerstones, then I'm going to need you to carry a load on offense as well, and that's a lot to ask a little bit, I believe, for Anunoby and Bridges, especially when you're guarding players of the caliber of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. That's where that's why I said chemistry needs to be a whole, and that's really what asking for that on night one. Looking back, is a lot to ask for. You're going to ask these two guys to guard the two best, two of the best cornerstones that Celtics have, and we're going to also ask them to give us 15 points each on their first night together on the floor meshing. That's a lot to ask. So I do expect things to be a whole lot better against Indiana Pacers. That just comes with, like I said, iron sharpening iron. That's all it's going to be for Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. And that's kind of what we're going to be having going forward with these guys. They mesh well together, and how to maximize defense as well as translate that to offense's possessions. I think things like getting out in transition and things like that nature will kind of take shape for the New York Knicks again. Like they were really great last year in transition. We're going to see more of that because you got to get easy buckets for these guys. You do not want to have these guys guarding the team's best two players and then coming down and trying to get in ISO scoring situations and things of that nature. So that's kind of how I expect things to, or anticipate things to go for the New York Knicks going forward. And it's really exciting. I think they got a dub coming Friday night, but I'm not going to get too wrapped up into that.
Sure.
Kind of hoping for the best right now, but it's going to be very exciting for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I'm excited for what's ahead for the Knicks too. I am. I think with Bridges and Anunoby together, I think we have a really good defensive duo. I'm not gonna draw a conclusion off of one game. It's one game. It is what it is. It happened. You had a really bad performance, but it's not the end of the world. You can fix it. You can get better at it, and yeah, you just go from there. So, guys, really hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know what you got to say about Mikal Bridges, though, in the comment section below. I know there's a lot to talk about with him, so we would love to hear it. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, of course, this YouTube page you are watching the video on. You can follow our personal Twitter accounts. They are above our heads. And we will see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out.